So on Monday, Google fired 4 employees, and Google will tell you they fired those employees because they acted inappropriately in their jobs. But what really happened is that those 4 people were union organizers, and they were fired because they were engaging in labor activity. Google might say that legally there's no proof of that, but in any reasonable interpretation, that's pretty much exactly what happened. These workers were fired in the midst of a culture change at Google, which is lowering levels of transparency and communication that workers had with management, that's been engaging in increasingly anti-union activities, and which has been connected to some of the more questionable alliances Google has made with forces inside the United States and globally in terms of how they collect data and how they share data. All of this has worried workers within Google, and a lot of them have been responding by trying to form a union, because a union can help protect them from arbitrary treatment, and a union can also help give them a collective voice in how they relate to the company, not just with regard to compensation, but with regard to company operations, at least potentially. And those policies at Google which have been changed have moved towards more arbitrary definitions of what workers are doing right and wrong. And companies do that because when things are arbitrary, it's easy to fire some workers for one thing and then keep others for doing the exact same thing. So what one worker does is a fireable offense, and what another worker does is just a slap on the wrist. And at the end of the day, that's what these 4 workers allege happened. They've done stuff that other people have done, but because they did it, and they've been involved in criticizing company policy, and they've been involved in labor organizing, that's why they were turfed. It has nothing to do with inappropriate action at the company, nothing to do with data leaks or security breaches or anything of the sort. And all of this is really important to realize because it's about more than Google. Certainly, the fight for workplace justice at Google will continue, but in the end, what this is really about is a changing nature within the tech industry. For a long time, tech workers didn't see themselves as needing unions. They thought that their skills, that the fact that they were STEM, majors and STEM educated people, the fact that they made good wages, the fact that they worked at innovative companies and, free thinking and forward thinking companies meant that they didn't need the sort of union that a worker at like a traditional auto factory or in a coal mine needed historically and today. But more and more, as these companies ramp up on their lack of transparency and they engage in anti-union activity, and more stories around harassment and bullying and nepotism come out through the media, more and more workers are seeing unions as the tool to address the fundamental concerns in the workplace and to give them that vital voice. And so in this context, you're seeing these changes happening. Workers in tech industry maybe won't be fighting primarily for wages and perks. That might not be their concern, but they might have serious concerns about how they're treated in the workplace. They might have serious concerns about bullying, about harassment, about transparency when it comes to both hiring, firing, and promotions. They might have real concerns about work-life balance, about how, their wages might be really good, but they're expected to work inordinate amount of hours. They're expected to be at the office every day for 18 hours a day. They might want policies that deal with crunch periods and to help mitigate their use and mitigate their intensity on the average worker and, of course, their families. And on all of these policies, unions can be a really important tool. And again, unions can be an important tool to give workers protection and collective voice when it comes to challenging the company in terms of its operations. If Google historically really did believe in giving workers the ability and freedom to criticize the company and question the company about what it was doing or not doing, then a union is a sort of contractual guarantee that the workers will have that ability and that they can do so together, and that a worker will not be retaliated against for doing so. A worker will not be retaliated against for criticizing company policy and trying to improve the way things are done. The tech industry has to be the future frontier of labor organizing. This isn't going away. The story at Google, whether it's overwork or whether it's, people being fired for being outspoken about unions or being outspoken about social justice and human rights and democracy, these issues are not going away. And these companies are some of the wealthiest and most powerful and most, well-connected companies in the entire world. Workers at these companies need to be organized. They need to be organized because they deserve a fair share of the revenue the company generates, and they need the ability to ensure that the company does not abuse them during their time at work, to ensure that these companies operate within the bounds of social justice, democracy, and a respect for human rights. The union is the only way to achieve that. No other tool will work. Google apparently used to have this great culture of transparency. I don't know if I believe that, but let's say it did. Let's say Google was once a golden shining beacon of how a company should operate. But of course, without a union, there's no guarantees. There's no contractual protection about what they can and can't do. Company policy can change. Management prerogatives are extremely broad. And so one day Google could be a company where everyone is treated fairly and can speak fairly. And the next day it can become a company where if you're engaged in any sort of controversial activity, you'll be fired or you'll be reprimanded or you'll be silenced or you'll be demoted or what have you. That's a real problem. And the only way you solve that is with a union. So I'm suggesting to people that if you want to see the tech industry deal with some of its internal issues and how those internal issues snowball into external issues, then workers being organized in those tech industries is the only way it's going to happen. Those workers need to realize increasingly that it's not just about the fact that they make better wages than most people. If they're being disrespected at work, if their expertise isn't being respected at work, if they don't have the freedom to speak out about injustices and problematic actions within the company, then they don't have freedom, they don't have that professional independence and creativity that they so desire, and they're actually no different than those factory workers that they felt needed unions all along. These industries are at a turning point right now. The workers in those industries are facing increasingly proletarianized conditions, and they have a choice. They can continue to struggle as individuals with ad hoc events here and there, the walkout here and there, the protest here and there. I'm not discounting the importance or the effectiveness of those actions. Or they can systematically organize to make lasting and meaningful change within their workplaces. I sincerely hope they pick the latter, and I know that if they do, they will have the support and solidarity of labor activists and progressives the world over.